Most people do not actually struggle to lose fat. The thing that most people struggle with is making sure they never gain the fat back again. And today we're not going to be talking about these quick fixes or anything like that. Today we're going to be talking about how you can lose the fat and never have to go back to feeling like you're starting again when it comes to fat loss. But before we get into that, Tom, how have you been? It's been a while since we've asked each other that, and we're going to pretend that we didn't ask each other that when we've got on this call initially and then hit record, but we'll just pretend. Editing magic.
Yeah.
How have you been?
Yeah. We just jumped straight on and jumped straight into it. It's mad, isn't it? It's just
No
like
warm up, no cool
3, 2,
down,
1.
nothing.
We synchronize on WhatsApp and then we go straight
Go.
in.
No talking, no fluff.
Yeah, nothing.
No preamble.
Just straight into it. Just straight into
Mhm.
it. Yeah, I'm good, thank you. I had the boys this weekend because Reb was away in Sweden, so
Very
it
nice.
was quite a full-on weekend. But I
was
think
gonna
it's
say.
one of those. Is like it's obviously hard and full-on, but like, you wouldn't expect it to be any other way. And if you kind of have that expectation, then it's great. And like, yeah, it's hard. You don't get much of a break, if any. But yeah, we had a lush time. It was like quite back to back in terms of kind of activities and stuff like that. But one really cool thing actually was I went to stay at my parents on the Saturday night, and they live right by one of the Brecon Beacon Mountains, the Blorange. So we actually did a hike up there on the Sunday, and
Yeah, saw those photos.
my 4-year-old, he was about 1.5 kilometers, like fairly steep climb up and 1.5 kilometers back, and he like did the whole thing with absolutely loving it. Like he was helped by the fact we had a cinnamon bun to have at the top, but
Fuel.
yeah, fuel.
Yeah.
But I just yeah, it was just really cool because I just I've got a lot of really fond memories of doing like hiking and mountain walks and stuff like that when I was younger, and it's just like, yeah, wicked to kind of expose him to that and also see him like loving it and kind of going like exploring a bit. He was like climbing up all the ridges on the side, like on the side and stuff like that. It was like, yeah, it was really cool. It was really cool.
Yeah, I always love going on walks like that. Was there any good sticks around? That's the first thing you look for when you go for a walk. Is it foresty or is it more mountain? Oh, perfect.
No. So it was more mountainous, but my 2-year-old Ollie was he walks about 10 meters and then I had to carry him the rest of the way. But he also insists on bringing a bucket with 2 ice cream cones in it, like plastic ice cream cones that you take to the beach. And part of the way up, we found some pine cones, so he put them in his bucket, and then Zach was bringing stones. So as we were going up, the bucket was kind of getting heavier and heavier as well.
That's amazing. That's literally all I remember. Like whenever we used to go on walks when we were a kid, I was like, the first thing I would do is find a stick that would obviously be used as a sword. You know, it's so funny.
Yeah.
Do you know the noise you make when you swing a stick and it makes that like whoosh, that noise through the air?
Yeah.
When I was a kid, I truly believed that sticks only had about 3 of those in them, those noises. Because I would get too tired to swing it the 4th time that I couldn't swing it fast enough to make the 3rd. So I genuinely, for so long, believed that a stick only had a limited amount of that noise. Just turns out I was too weak.
Hilarious.
Isn't that? Yeah, that was
so
like
funny.
a childhood thing for me. I was like, you've only got 2 good wishes in this stick. Just turns out I was getting fatigued extremely quickly and didn't have the force. No, but that sounds great. This
yeah.
What did I get up to this weekend? I had some friends around, which was nice to see. I made friends playing American football, and I obviously don't play anymore, so be hanging out with them, which was really nice. Ate a lot of sushi, so I was pretty happy with that. Yeah, but the thing I was kind of wanted to talk about briefly is the fact that I have had probably the least amount of motivation to train lately. And I think I know what it is, and I think this is good to mention this to people, is that it is challenging to train just to train. Like usually, what motivates me, and this is kind of interesting, as I said, like for me to even think about, is that I usually have to have something to train for. Like football or like bodybuilding, or like having a goal to train for, like really helps me. But it's as simple as this now in my life, like the point of life I'm at, where even if I don't have I've not got any holidays planned this year, I'm going to try and maybe go to Spain or something, but because I know I don't really need to take my shirt off, I just don't really care. I'm just like, I'm just at that point where I'm just like, you know what? Like, yeah, like training's cool and all that stuff, but I just found recently I've found it quite difficult to engage with. And this is not the first time this has happened. Like, training for 20 years, this happens all the time. It's just about trying to find how to find your enthusiasm again. But I just thought it'd
Yeah,
be cool to mention that because, I think a lot of people do look at us and think that we've got unlimited motivation or we can just get it done. And don't get me wrong, I've still been training, but goddamn, trying to get myself to the gym, which is, again, I'm saying this, literally, I could get to my gym and back here before you've been to pee. Like it's that quick. Like it's that like my gym is in my house and it's pretty well kitted out. So I just want to say that because again, I think there's this weird disconnect with people who are coaches and a lot of people looking in just think, oh, you motivation isn't a thing you even need anymore. It's like, yeah, of course it is. Like it's nice to have it, but
yeah,
damn, you've just got to find what ways you'll enjoy training again. And it's something we've talked about quite a bit on this podcast of like the fundamentals. Literally, you got to find the fun in the fundamentals. There you go.
yeah,
Because if you're not training for something, like we're not training, you're not training for a competition. You're probably training for BJJ, but again, that's not your fundamental reason for training. It's just cool that it's a force multiplier for you doing Brazilian Jiu Jitsu.
yeah,
So yeah, I've just got to find out how to get my motivation back for training, which
yeah.
is
Have you got any
something I've
ideas?
done. Maybe so a couple things I've done in the past changes up the environment. So I'm not going to a gym at the moment, so I think I might try to
Yeah,
find a new gym close to me because the one I was going to was great, but it was just too far. Like
yeah,
it was like 20 minutes. And again, this is Northern Ireland, so 20 minutes if you're in London or anywhere else in the world, that's like an hour. 20 minutes in Northern Ireland is the equivalent of an hour of driving. So because Northern Ireland's extremely small. So if it's a 20-minute journey, you're like, yeah, it's a bit
yeah,
far. Either that or just train what I want and how I want, even though I know sticking to a program is how I usually feel the best and the most kind of put together when it comes to my training.
yeah,
I think I've just got to lean into what I find fun at the moment and then lean into that, regardless of what it is, because I usually do that. I usually lean into something fun and then I'm like, and then the momentum builds and I get back into the swing of things. So I think potentially join a
yeah,
gym or just swap out my training to make it like as enjoyable as possible.
yeah.
But yeah.
Nice.
So shall we jump into today's episode and talk about how to
Let's
lose fat and never find it again?
let's get on it.
Okay. So point number one that we think is very important when it comes to losing fat and then making sure it doesn't really come back is looking at this as a process. And a part of that process is going to be the habits you start making or potentially start to refine in another sense. So to me, all right, okay, so Tom, like what habits do you think if someone came to you to lose body fat, what are the habits that you would start looking at to make sure that that person, lost the weight initially, but then was able to find a lifestyle or habits that would help that? Like, what habits would you start to look at instilling?
So we touched on quite a few of these bits in last week's episode about
Hmm.
how to drop fat, and obviously that's where this kind of this comes in. I think initially building awareness of nutrition and like not necessarily always tracking, but initially having that awareness, and then finding finding a way of eating that is relatively easy for you to sustain. Um,
Yep.
is like a really good first step. And then outside of that, the other two like big habits that you will use both through sort of fat loss and also sort of maintaining that after are making sure you're kind of staying on top of your like your non-exercise activity. So making sure you're basically staying as active as possible. And it's not just like obviously like you said, a lot of people end up that like they people are good at dropping fat, but then they come to the end of that and they stop doing everything that they were doing.
Yep.
Um, and that's where the weight comes back on. So yeah, keeping on top of your general activity. Like obviously step count is the easiest way to monitor that. And then also keeping up with your like with some form of training as well.
Hmm.
Um those would be sort of like the biggest habits that I would kind of look at initially, and Yeah, I think as well, it's like it's really easy when um you're going through a fat loss phase to be sort of very focused on the outcome in terms of like just that number on the scale, but actually taking a step back and look at the process that you're going through, and finding like a process that is enjoyable and that you can kind of carry on doing after is going to be really important. Not to say that like some stuff you do whilst you're in a fat loss phase has to be completely sustainable. You can go through phases of doing stuff that is unsustainable, but having a plan and knowing what that process looks like off the back, I think is really important. What would you add to that?
I mean, yeah, I echo everything you said there. And something I like to do with my clients is I like them to envision what this version of themselves, this potentially leaner version of themselves, and perpetually lean. Again, leanness is all relative, but I always get them to answer a couple of simple questions of saying, right, okay, I want you to place yourself in the shoes of this person that you're trying to become, that we're trying to work towards. Do they wing their workouts? No, they go in and they've got structure. They know when they're training. Do you think that they just look at, they just go, oh, I'll train today? Or do you think they've maybe pre-planned potentially what days they're going to train? Do you think that they shy away from all activity as best as possible, or do they find ways of squeezing activity into their lives? I think that's a really good way of framing it to be, if this is how does a lean person act? Do they wake up every morning and just guess what they're going to have to eat? You start getting them into that way of thinking of like, okay, what way do I have to act in order for this to happen? Like, what way does that person act? I want to be, how do I replicate that? And you start making more decisions based off, what that person would do. And I think it kind of bridges the gap between what people are kind of imagining and then the actual realities of it. I think
Yeah,
that's a really good kind of, meeting point for that, because oftentimes a lot of these people who are trying to lose weight, they don't know what it's like to be lean,
yeah,
because it's something they have to just pretend that exists until it actually exists. And a lot of people, unfortunately, never get to see that. So instead, you have to go, okay, well, if you were lean, how do you think you would have got there? What do you do in a day? What does your day look like? What do you eat? Do you plan what you're going to eat? Do you maybe just have, you got to start getting into the kind of nitty gritty details of like what every single day, whilst it might be quite boring to a certain degree, or feel like it might be quite monotonous. I'm like, well, that's kind of what's required for you to get to where you want to go. Like, you need to have these habits and, act on these actions more often than you don't. Because again, that's something that's worth noting, that I think a lot of people have that all or nothing mentality when it comes to stuff like this. And that's
yeah,
arguably the worst mentality you can have. I think I genuinely hate when people have that, like, I'm an all or nothing type of person. I'm like,
yeah,
it's not a badge of honor. Like, you wear it like a badge of honor, but it's not, because what happens if the smallest thing derails you? It's all going to fall apart. So I think
yeah,
it's important that you kind of establish that, look, this is not something you have to do. Like you said about nutrition, whenever sometimes you're in an extreme fat loss phase and you have to do things you usually wouldn't do. You have to really get into people's understanding of, this is what you do the majority of the time, not the minority of the time. So if you go out and you're in a
yeah,
fat loss phase and you go out with your mates and you have some drinks, or you eat more food than you normally would have, let's take a step back and see that that's one weekend, that's one meal. You can go even further. You can be like, well, that's like X amount of hours. How many hours in the week do you get? Okay, well, let's work out what those couple of hours that you maybe didn't do the right thing, I'm air quoting here. Let's put it into perspective and see what percentage that is of your week.
yeah,
And if it's a lot of times it's less than like 1% of their week, and you're like, okay, well, if you came to me with 1% on a test, you failed that test. There's no way someone's going to pass you on like 2%. So it's
yeah.
about trying to make sure that people see that it's like, this is a process and not this, like, it has to be everything 100%. But yeah, making them think, how would I act if I were that person, is a kind of good framing mechanism for it.
Yeah,
And a lot of that
definitely.
is
And
going to
I think
come from habits.
I was just going to say on top of that, I think what's quite cool about this process is like as you go through it, as you get obviously as you get sort of like you'll have dropped some body fat, but hopefully you'll have got fitter, you'll have got stronger. You'll
Yeah.
be like you'll have a more kind of capable body, let's say. Um, Probably there'll be more activities that you'll potentially enjoy doing. Like one of my clients who he's lost 25 kilos over the time that I've worked with him, and
Oof.
he loves training, but he's recently got into like mountain biking, and he's absolutely loving that at the moment. And that's something that if he was still carrying that 25 kilos, yeah, he might have got into it, but it's probably going to be more enjoyable for him now, like that he is like way fitter, way stronger, and like it's now that's how he gets his like his aerobic work in for the most part. Like, yeah, he supplements it like sometimes, but I think being open to like you said, almost like imagining what that future version of you is
Yeah,
like, and potentially like what you may like if there's anything that you may like to try, even if it's like really enjoy, like, as I said earlier, going out and hiking up mountains or that sort of thing. I think and obviously you don't need to wait until you've lost the fat to go
yeah,
and do that. But I think it's like the people that will succeed long term are the people who actively seek out things that they do enjoy doing, that are active, and keep them active, and probably have some form of like social or community element to them as well. Um,
massively important. Yeah. No, I
yeah,
love that. I love the, yeah. I mean, that's the kind of, I think that's one of the most enjoyable things about a fat loss process for for me as a coach, like seeing people do things that they thought were just not for them.
yeah,
Like Dave, for example, again, shout out to Dave, the guy who helps proof listen to all our episodes. He said to me the other day, like, I did a dip and a body weight he's so close to a body weight pull up now, and he did a body weight dip, and he said to me like the other day, this is just something I didn't think was for me.
yeah,
I never thought I'd be able to do this. This is just something that was in a different category to me, and I would never get access to it. And that's one of the coolest things about seeing people do this, is that you start to see their adventure, their adventurous side come out, and then they start doing these things, and like, oh, didn't I think I'd enjoy that? And then they start looking at other things they might, and it's kind of, yeah, it's kind of exactly what I would love for someone to get from this process, is just show them how many things they could potentially enjoy that they maybe
yeah,
thought they would never enjoy, or something they enjoy but are getting even more enjoyment of it. Like you said, like, you can still go hiking if you're
yeah,
not the weight you want to be, but you'll also then notice that whenever you go back to it, having lost some weight, how much easier it is and how much more manageable you are, or much more manageable it is for you. Um, Anything else you want to add to habits, and basically before we get into the next one? Anything
no,
else you want to add?
let's go point number two.
Awesome. Do you want to go for it?
Yeah. So point number two is building a diet that you actually enjoy. And I think there's obviously like carryover from what we were talking about habits, and I think this is where this is the difference between sort of a crash diet, or like one of the named diets, and then having a big rebound versus actually managing this for the long term. I think a lot of
Mm-hmm.
the time when you're in a deficit, if you build a like for the most part there, yes, there is going to be some restriction, but a way of eating that is like relatively enjoyable, let's say, because like I said, if you're in a deficit, there will
Yeah,
always be some restriction. um Transitioning then to maintenance becomes far easier, because all you've got is like you've got what you were doing, and then you just add a little bit of flexibility on top of that.
that's it. Yeah,
So actually finding, finding a way of eating that it satisfies all of your needs, for both from a kind of fueling and performance perspective, but also um, that like the enjoyment that you get from eating, like social occasions, that sort of thing, and factoring all of that into your diet going forwards. And I think that that's where, if you have a period of ultra restriction, you're more likely to rebound, because there's been so much that you've kind of been depriving yourself of. Whereas having that approach of like sort of food freedom, of like, if I want this thing, I can have it. But a lot of the time, you'll probably still choose to have like a lot of the good stuff that you were having before. And obviously, like, your diet's not going to change drastically, in terms of like, you'll still be trying to get in a decent amount of protein. You'll still be trying to get in a decent amount of fruit and veg. You'll still be drinking plenty of water. You'll still be getting in like a good amount of fiber. But you just have that bit more kind of flexibility with it. And I think something that I find quite useful with this, when working with people, is just kind of explaining that, like, you don't have to eat the same amount every single day. And this
yeah,
is the same
yeah.
for like whether you're in a diet phase or a maintenance phase, or a surplus. Um, there'll be some days where you are less hungry. So don't force
Just eat
yourself to
less.
eat more
Yeah,
on those days, because there will be days where either you've got something social going on, or you are more hungry, or that, or like anything like that. So sort of utilize that. And a lot of people during the week, it's a little bit easier to be in a deficit because you've got like you're getting up, you've got like sort of a lot more time pressures, you've got like a lot more stress. So it's probably easier to actually eat a little bit less. And then on the weekends, generally people are being a bit more sociable and do
Yeah.
have more time and probably are thinking about food a little bit more. So it makes sense to kind of have a slightly lower calories during the week and slightly higher on the weekend. And that can be the same whether you're in a deficit or at maintenance. Just the amounts will vary slightly.
Yeah, calorie banking. It's
Yeah,
something that I say quite a lot to people is that, yes, there's a certain target area that we need to be hitting for your calorie goal, but that doesn't mean you need to be hitting it every single day because every single day is different. As you said earlier, some days you wake up hungry, some days you don't, sometimes you got more time, some days you don't, and you've got to make sure that whatever you're doing accounts for that. Because I think that whenever you eat, and let's say, for example, someone's trying to lose weight and their calories are 2,000 calories, even just having a very set and rigid number on that is stressful. I remember when I was doing bodybuilding training, you had to get had to, again, I'm air quoting, had to get everything lined up perfectly. And I was doing the whole like, oh, X amount of carbs, X amount of fats, and blah, blah, blah. The stress of putting that puzzle together every single day, of trying to get all the macros balanced and all the calories balanced. Then, obviously, with hindsight and just experience, I was like, I didn't need to do that. That was
yeah,
adding way too much stress to my life. I should just looked at it as a week and be like, right, where are my calories? What do they need to be at the end of the week? Cool. Some days I'll have a little bit more. Sometimes I'll have little bit less. But at the end of the week, that's all that matters. And then stepping back again and being like, right, over 2 weeks, what does it look like? Then over 3, then over 4. And ultimately, if it's going down and it's going in the direction you want it to be, you don't need to put that pressure on yourself of trying to have the exact amount of calories. And again, I always say this when this comes up about calorie counting, every single thing that you scan, if you are scanning calories, has a 10% inaccuracy. Like they're allowed to have 10% of, or I know, is it 10 or 20? God,
not
I say
sure.
this all the time, but I think it's 10%. So like if you're having something and it says 100 calories, it could be 110 calories, could be 90. I think it's 20% now that I'm saying that. Of course, I've said this so many times and now I get it confused, but there's basically a level of indiscrepancy of what is actually on a label compared to what
Yeah,
you're actually getting. So even if you are super particular about getting every single calorie tracked, it's still not that accurate. So
yeah,
don't stress about it too much. I think having a flexible approach and making sure that you're, I say this quite frequently as well. Is I think a lot of people look at dieting and they say, right, what do I need? Like, what does my body need? And then they fill out everything in their diet with according to that rule. When I think it's, again, this is different to every single person, but it's realistically when you're in a phase like this, it's finding out what you can get away with, really. Like, okay,
yeah,
I need to, so what does my body need for me to achieve this goal? Okay, I need protein, I need the right amount of calories, I need carbs around my workouts to make sure I'm fueled and recovering, blah, blah, blah. Okay, cool. Once that's kind of taken care of, what do I want? What does my brain want? Because we are not robots. If we were, we would just eat the same tasteless gruel every single day and no one would have any issues with it. But we have these things called taste buds and preferences and culture and all that stuff. So it's really important to try. And sometimes you will not be able to do this depending on how restrictive you're being. Try to include things in your diet that make your brain happy, even if they're not optimal for what you're trying to do, because everyone's got that wiggle room to a certain degree. And again, depending on the individual, depending on what phase you're in or what you're trying to achieve, that will vary quite a bit. But I think whenever you include foods you enjoy, your adherence to it shoots up because it's suddenly down. It doesn't feel like a diet. It's just the way you eat. And again, that'll vary depending on what you've got. But this is a random
yeah.
question, Tom. So when people are cutting out foods, what do you see as the most common thing? Like just in general, like when someone says to you, oh, I'm trying to lose weight, and you're at like a barbecue or something, they're like, I'm going to cut this out. What is the first thing they usually say to you, just out of experience?
Um, that's quite a hard
Uh,
one. Probably sugar's like a really common one, isn't it?
yeah,
Um,
which obviously
yeah,
we know you don't need to do. Like sugar's not inherently bad. I was going to say bread.
yeah.
A lot of the time
Oh, yeah,
when people are trying to lose weight, they're like, I'm cutting bread out, and I'm like, Especially when
Yeah.
you're in that you're in that situation. All of you just wants to be like, "Oh, you don't need to," but you're just like, "It's
Yeah.
fine. Let them make that decision. I'm
Yeah.
not their coach. I'm just their mate. Just yeah, you go ahead and you do that." But yeah, I think a lot of people do innately just cut out things entirely. And I always think if you cut something out, pink elephant effect, all you can think about is the food
Yeah.
that you've cut out. You're not giving yourself. So I think including it in some small ways really does help adherence, which is the most important thing. You get the perfect diet. I keep air quoting the perfect diet on paper for what you're trying to achieve. But if you look at all that food and go, I don't like any of this stuff, it's not the optimal diet for you. It doesn't matter
Yeah.
how effective it is. So fun random story. So I remember years ago, I was getting ready for a photo shoot. And it's the first time I hired a coach. This is 15, 16, maybe even longer ago now, 16 years ago. And I got a coach to send me a nutrition plan. And oh my word, it was the most, bearing in mind, what age was I? 20, early 20s. I looked at it, and one of the first things on it was line caught salmon. I then quickly scanned through quail eggs.
Oh wow.
And I was like, yeah, I'm not gonna do this.
Yeah.
That's a perfect example of like, it might be the most optimal way for you to eat, for you to achieve your goal. But if you don't like it or it's not feasible for you as a 21-year-old person, oh yeah, I'm just gonna go get my salmon here, my fresh caught line salmon.
Yeah.
Seriously, dude, that's what he sent me. So, yeah, you
Wow.
got to make sure it's realistic and you can actually adhere to it, just like training, which
Yeah.
segues nicely on to point number 3. Keep training. I think a lot of people look at their training differently when it comes to fat loss, which is, yeah, I understand it. And there's some elements that might have to change very, very, very slightly. But realistically, when you are bulking, when you are, I'm using the bad term for that, but when you're trying to put on size or muscle or maintain or lose fat, your training remains pretty much the same. Obviously, depending on what level of uh, severity you're going to. Like if you're dieting really, really hard, you might need to maybe reduce your training volume and intensity just to make sure you can actually recover from it. But again, that's in extreme cases. And again, I would really like to point out the fact that human beings are far more capable than we realize. I think a lot of people are quite, yeah, fuck it, soft. Like they are. They're quite soft when it comes to stuff. And whenever you put someone in a diet, they go, oh, I'm going to shrivel away to nothing. I'm so weak. And I'm like, no, 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 no. Don't start thinking like that. If you go into a diet and
Yeah.
go, oh, I'm going to get so weak, yeah, you probably are because you're going to start lifting like a fool and you're not going to push yourself because you think you've got this, you've almost convinced yourself of
Yeah.
this thing that doesn't actually exist. So, what are the things that you do? Like, is there anything you tweak or change or anything like that when it comes to training, when it comes to fat loss?
Um, no, not necessarily. Like you say, that like if you've been in a deficit for a long period of time, there are potential considerations from a training perspective. Like it might be that you do have to slightly drop your volume or
Yep.
just really think about where you're putting your training in a day to make sure you've got as much energy as possible because you are going to have like a bit of a dip in energy and your desire to train will drop off like towards the end of a dieting phase. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I completely agree with you. I think yeah, you like people are a lot more capable than what they give themselves credit for, and a lot of the time you kind of like your mind is obviously very powerful, and if you kind of think that that will happen, then it obviously like it's much more likely to happen.
Yep.
Um, but in terms of training generally, I can't remember like the exact numbers or in the exact study, but it was a massive study based on looking at people who had lost weight over a period of time, and I think it was the number one factor for the people that ended up keeping that weight off. They were the people that consistently trained after their dieting phase, and I think it's like a lot of people obviously think when they're going through like a dieting phase, it's like the training is really important, have to ramp everything up, have to like add in all this like aerobic work, have to like almost do more.
Yep.
Um, and in the same way as like if you're in a really restrictive diet, you're more likely to kind of rebound off the back of it. Like in the same thing, like your energy will be worse, and you're trying to push the other way. you like it's quite easy to get to the point where you're like, oh, like training's rubbish, and then just dropping off after. But it's the people that end up dropping off completely that are much more likely to end up regaining that weight. Um,
Yeah.
and actually, I think um, after a dieting phase is actually when training becomes a lot more enjoyable, because you've actually got you're actually
Energy.
fueling and able to perform a lot better. So like you'll probably notice that you're like going into the gym or going out for a run or whatever it is. If you're actually eating a little bit more, those sessions will feel so much better than what they did after you've been in a period of dieting.
Oh yeah.
And that's something that like you should definitely lean into and utilize. And this it's one of the things that, like we've spoken about it before on one of the previous episodes of like almost like adjusting your mindset, because you're not going to see the scale weight moving anymore. Let's focus on performance and seeing like some stuff moving in the gym and feeling better there, because that is like it's basically it's our point number 4 about sort of embracing and kind of moving into maintenance. But it is
Yep.
um it's the most powerful way to actually get out the back of a dieting phase, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree. I mean, should we just go into point number 4? Because you've
Yeah,
dovetailed quite
yeah.
nicely into it.
I've ruined the surprise.
Oh, no. So yeah, it's looking at these in like a long-term focus. And if you are in a fat loss phase for a while, it's important that, no one should really, and we've mentioned this multiple times on this podcast, but your goal shouldn't be always to be trying to gain weight or trying to lose weight. There should be periods of your life where you're just trying to maintain what you've got. And, I will argue to the day I die that that's ultimately what we should all be aiming for. We should be looking to find how we can maintain where we're at, because we have this process that is always it's results driven, obviously, but when you go to maintenance, it's hard for people to see the wins because there's not always going to be that same level of metrics, as in like whenever you're trying to put on size, you're trying to see the scale weight go up, or you're trying to see measurements going up, or the gym, you're going to probably see a lot more results in the gym because you're on higher energy and all that stuff. Fat loss, weight coming down, clothes fitting you differently, blah blah blah. It's the same thing, but just sort of flipped over. Doesn't mean they're the same thing in general, but similar results and kind of standards across both sides of them. But whereas maintenance, it's tricky. I think it's a very tricky place for people to be in. Is it, or maintenance phase is something you include? Like if someone was in a fairly serious fat loss phase, like is a maintenance phase throughout that something you include in their training, or what way do you approach it?
It depends on the person, but I think as a general rule, having like taking this long term view of like, say you've got 10 kilos that you want to lose. Like some people are going to be able to just like go into a deficit and they'll be able to kind of power through and drop that 10 kilos. Some people, it might like you might lose 5 and then things might start to get a bit harder, particularly if you're juggling other things like poor sleep, or like you've got loads going on at work, or those like other things like that. And we know that as you go through a dieting phase, either the longer you're in a deficit or the more aggressive that deficit is, there are going to be some changes that happen to you hormonally in terms of you will be more hungry. You'll be less satisfied by the food you're eating, and probably find that you'll then you're automatically reaching for your food because your body's it's that like you've been in this deficit for so long that your body's then trying to kind of push it back the other way. It's trying to kind of go back to kind of equilibrium. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so that we know that there will become a point in a dieting phase that it will get hard, and sometimes you can just push through that and just accept that it's going to be hard. In other situations, if like what I sometimes find happens is like the goal is to be in a deficit, but then you've got all this stuff going on. So you're finding it harder at that point, both for like probably hormonal reasons and potentially other like life reasons.
Mm-hmm.
But you're still trying to be in a deficit, but you're not actually in a deficit because you end up overeating at certain points throughout the week, and you end up in this like crap cycle of feeling really restrictive, energy still being poor, but also not making any progress for like in terms
Yeah.
of sort of dropping weight. And at that point, it's definitely worth considering going back to maintenance for a little while, bringing all those things back up, bringing your energy back up, bringing like getting your kind of hunger signals back under control, that sort of thing, and having the goal of that phase to be maintenance before then trying to drop some more. And I think that's where yeah, a lot of people are probably a little bit short-sighted. Like, I've got this weight to drop. I'm just gonna go do it. Actually, at some point, you might end up fighting against yourself so hard that you're kind of spinning your wheels and not getting anywhere. And at that point, I would definitely recommend you do sort of strategically think about it and sort of have like phases of maintenance within that. So it's kind of like rather than being like a straight drop, not that it ever is like fully like completely linear, but it'll be more of a kind of step change as you go along, rather than just like one kind of downward trend.
Continues. Yeah. I like to include, again, it depends on the individual, but I like to try and include maintenance breaks throughout a fat loss phase because one, mentally gives people a break. Like that's probably one of the most challenging things that people will face whenever they're in a calorie deficit. It does become very all consuming because that's the primary goal in day. Like nearly every single action you take in a day is going to be contributing to this goal. And I think just taking that break from that is good for some people. And if someone's going through like a stressful period of time, the last thing they need to be concerned about is, am I losing an extra half a gram this week? Or, sometimes
Yeah,
it's just, it comes by case by case. But I also think it's good to kind of show people like, look, this is something that I think you, you can't say you've really achieved something unless you know how to maintain it. Like
yeah,
realistically. Like you might have fluked your way to it. Like I lost weight because I did this thing, and I'm like, yeah, but like how did you lose the weight? Because if they don't really know the answer, then they've not really achieved it. Knowing how to maintain something is super important, and even just showing people the other side of what the gym can do. Because if someone goes into the gym and they exclusively treat it, and they've only ever been in there as a goal or a tool to help them lose weight, if you show someone, hey, look, the gym can be designed for this, for fun, for like that level of like achievement in other areas. Like, for example, a client that I have, he's out in LA, and every time we do a check-in, we'll go through his form. And one of the things that he said he enjoys the most is that sense of accomplishment that every time he sends me a form video, there's less and less and less things for me to point out and tweak and change for him. So that's another aspect that becomes very rewarding for people. And I think it's cool to show people, look, you will get to a point, hopefully, like that's always the goal, where fat loss is no longer a massive priority for you because you've achieved it and you know how to maintain it. So what's going to keep you going to the gym now that you've achieved
yeah,
this thing, this big crescendo? Okay, well, let's start looking at all the other elements that makes going to the gym fun and feel like an accomplishment. So I think, yeah, having a maintenance phase is really beneficial for multiple people and multifaceted, a multitude of different ways as well. But yeah, I think it's really important that you do treat this like a long-term thing rather than the short-term thing because, anyone who really doesn't like themselves that much can lose fat by just not eating for 6 weeks and punishing themselves, like truly punishing themselves. Whereas someone who wants to achieve this long term, they need to learn how to work for themselves and make sure that they're doing something that is ultimately sustainable for by them. So I mean, point number 5 kind of is covered in this as well of moving to maintenance. So I think this is where most people struggle, as I said earlier, that dieting is not necessarily. It can feel like a bit of a finish line, and I'm going to relate this to when I was bodybuilding. Whenever I got into bodybuilding and I did my shows and I did the everything that I needed to do. As soon as I finished the show, I was so directionless because I didn't know what to do after the shows. And now in hindsight, again, being 2020, should have had something lined up, should have had something prepared for after the show, but I didn't. And I felt so lost. I felt so unmotivated. And I think a lot of people will share that whenever they've achieved the thing that they were setting out to achieve when it comes to like fat loss, for example. So what do you like? Again, we've kind of covered this in the other post, but I just think it is. We figured it was an important thing to kind of end this on. What do you think like, have you experienced people who struggle going from fat loss to maintenance, and what did they kind of go through? Is there anything you can remember them saying to you, or how did you help them? What do you jump up in calories by a lot? Do you kind of slowly increase them? Like, what's your approach to this? Taking someone from fat loss to maintenance?
So yeah, as we've spoken about, I think that, like, mentally it can be like very challenging in the first couple of weeks when you've been like so focused on this metric of like scale weight dropping. Not that that's the only metric, but it's the easiest one to track.
Hmm.
Um, so then the goal for that to not move is like I think people do feel like they're spinning their wheels, or sort of like they've just kind of stalled, and that's where people do fall off. So I think at that point, having like we've already spoken about, sort of performance based goals in the gym makes it a lot more enjoyable, because like particularly like when you finish that dieting phase, like energy is going to be low, you're going to be feeling a bit crap. Going in and act like feeling like you can absolutely smash your sessions is something that is like
Mm.
quite rewarding in itself.
Yep.
um and then what, like, yeah, from there, I would normally sort of like bring calories up relatively slowly, just because I think there
Yep.
is, like, for a lot of people there is that hesitancy to like put the weight back on that they've had. So you kind of have to show them that they can eat more and it's going to be okay. And actually, like, I've had some people that have actually brought their calories back up after the dieting phase and actually carried on losing weight for a little bit, because they're now like fueling their training. They're
Output.
feeling better. They're
Yep.
they're moving a lot more subconsciously day to day, so they're actually like in a better position. And that's essentially what we want. Is we want people to be eating the absolute most possible whilst maintaining weight. And you can be at maintenance between like a range, like on sort of like the low end, you can put like, you probably energy won't be as good as it could be, but you'll still be like maintaining weight. Whereas if you kind of like creep that up until that point where you just start to put on a little bit of weight and then maybe back it off, that's the sweet spot for a lot of people. But I also think it's a little bit of a kind of, it's a bit of a muddy middle ground in terms of like when you're dieting as well, in terms of managing your nutrition. The goal is restriction, like, and everyone knows what it's like to kind of restrict what you're eating. But then you're kind of, once you come back to maintenance, you're stuck in this weird place of like, okay, I can eat more, but should I eat more here? Or like, it's quite hard to manage that, which is like why I mentioned earlier about sort of from a habit perspective. I would generally stick with the kind of structure and setup that you've got from when you're like in a deficit. And then if someone's maybe been intermittent fasting, I might sort of suggest that they like add breakfast back in. But if
Hmm.
if not, then it might be a case of just like adding some food to what you're already doing, or just keeping the weekdays relatively similar, maybe adding a little bit more, and then giving yourself a bit more flexibility on the weekend when you probably want that bit more flexibility. So those are kind of like a few different options. It obviously depends on the person in front of you. And then from a training perspective, like I said, like kind of focusing heavily on performance. And initially that might be focusing on like on gaining muscle mass, or it might be sort of looking at strength numbers, or it might be looking at kind of pushing performance from something aerobic as well, but like maybe looking at sort of signing up for a 5 or 10K or something along those lines, to kind of have something else in like the not too distant future that you're then working towards. um, but I think having sort of some gauge of sort of metrics in terms of what you're doing in the gym and from a running perspective is also like really useful to kind of see that progress over time, because that at the end of the day makes training more enjoyable and therefore easier to stay consistent.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, as I said, like, fat loss ultimately does come down to creating a lifestyle that works for you. And I think a lot of people see fat loss, the success in fat loss, as once I get to X number, I'm done.
Yeah,
When I say this a lot to the people I work with, but the goal is not to get to X number. The goal is to never really have to chase a number ever again. That's
yeah.
that's that's the ultimate goal. That's the ultimate like seal of success when it comes to fat loss. So Tom, but quickly before we go, would you rather hiccup bubbles or sneeze confetti?
Oh, I think I'd sneeze
Yeah,
confetti.
I think so too. I hate hiccuping. Love a good sneeze, but I think it'd be
Yeah.
hilarious in every situation.
How often are we doing it?
Every time, every time you hiccup, every time you sneeze for
Okay.
the rest of your life, it's built in.
Yeah. Just give everyone a face full of celebration every time you sneeze.
Yeah, it's is it going to be a mix? That's the
Definitely
question.
wouldn't
Is
cover
it?
your
No,
your
just
mouth.
do that. Oh, dude,
I just literally like spray. I just like spray it on people.
you're
Yeah.
welcome.
Yeah.
Would be a lot more entertaining. I made the absolute grievous mistake the other day, and I don't know if this has happened to you in your adult life, but having a mouthful of rice and then knowing you have to sneeze.
Oh yeah, that's awful.
It's the most
Not just
disgusting.
rice, like any kind of food.
Any pre-chewed, any good food that you've been chewing for a while, and then you feel building up, you're like, oh no, because you hold it in, and if you hold it in, you do run that risk of it like really hurting. You know, when you hold a sneeze in it, like
Yeah.
it's like a shotgun going off inside of your body rather than out. But yeah, I made that mistake, and it just went everywhere. Ollie was loving it. Ollie absolutely loved
Oh,
it. He got
yeah.
some extra food, but yeah. Well, if you enjoyed this episode, please let us know. We really appreciate it. We've been getting a couple of messages recently from people who are enjoying the podcast, and we just want to say a massive thank you for anyone who is listening. Again, please share, tag us, let us know that you're listening to the podcast. It really does mean we don't do this for, well, we do this for fun at the end of the day, Tom. But we want to make sure that we're helping people, and you guys just simply telling us and letting us know. It does make this a little bit easier to do, even though it's, I say that, I just have to talk to Tom for an hour. It's woe is me. I'll jump on this grenade for everyone else. Don't worry. Don't worry. I've got it. I've got it for us all. But yeah, we really appreciate you guys listening, and we hope we will hear you. You'll hear us. We'll not hear you. That's not how this works. Hopefully you will hear us in the next episode. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm fine. I'm fine. Love you all. We'll see you in the next one.
Thank you for listening, guys. Bye bye.